Hi, my name is Alex Dorenbaum. I'm the Chief Medical Officer at Reneo Pharmaceutical, and I want to thank the organizers of UMDF for inviting us to talk to you. Reneo is a clinically stage company focusing on genetic mitochondrial diseases. We began operations in 2018 with a very experienced management team. Our drug, Reneo-1, is a potent selective PPAR delta agonist that is being tested for treatment of patients with primary mitochondrial myopathy. And the way Reneo works is we went to look for the potential drugs that could be used in patients with PMM, and we looked at all the companies that had worked with multiple drugs and that they were currently not developing those drugs because of business reasons. And we look at the biology of those drugs and try to understand if that drug may work in patients with PMM. And the advantage of doing this is that Big Pharma usually does a lot of studies with these drugs before they actually give them to patients. And Reneo-1, when we evaluated Reneo-1, it already had an extensive safety pharmacology and a chronic toxicology study that had been completed in animals. So we had a lot of understanding about how this drug may be tolerated and how it may work in patients with PMM. In addition to this, the drug already had quite a bit of information in regards to the chemistry, the manufacturing, and the quality control of the drug. And this is very important because when you do studies, you want to make sure you have a consistent, good medication that you can use in your studies. We also knew that the drug had a favorable pharmacokinetics or PK profile. This is very important because PK or pharmacokinetics refers to how a drug is absorbed into the body, metabolized or used in the body, and then excreted out of the body. And the advantage of this drug is that it can be given once a day by mouth, very easy to take, very simple procedure to be able to take the medication. And also, the drug already had extensive phase 1 and proof of concept information, and that enabled us to do a PMM clinical study very quickly. And we actually have completed that proof of concept study in PMM. And let me share a little bit about that program with you. So one of the main reasons why we got interested, in PMM and in Reneo-1 as a drug that can help PMM is because Reneo-1 is what we call an agonist. It stimulates a receptor in the cells. And the receptor that Reneo-1 stimulates is called PPAR delta. And when you stimulate PPAR delta in the cell, and by the way, PPAR delta is primarily found in muscle cells. So when you stimulate PPAR delta, what you do is you induce the formation of new enzymes in the muscle that help remodel the muscle so that it will work better. What it does is it actually increases the enzymes that are available in the mitochondria, the enzymes that metabolize fats to generate energy. And it also stimulates the genes that are involved in the formation of new mitochondria. So this was all very exciting for us because if we can improve how the mitochondria function and we can expand the number of mitochondria in the cell, we can provide better energy for the muscle to work well. And that's the suggested mechanism of action of PPAR delta agonist drugs. So this made a lot of sense to us, and that's why we were very excited about this drug. And then we set up to do a first study, and the first study that we did was a proof of concept trial in patients with PMM. This was a 12-week study. Patients received the medicine once a day by mouth, and they had the option to continue into an extension study after the 12 weeks of treatment. We enrolled about 23 patients in the study. All of these patients had mitochondrial gene defects. They all had a history of myopathy that is injury and damage to the muscle and difficulty in moving their muscles. They all were adults, older than 18 years of age. And because we wanted to evaluate exercise tests in these patients, we made sure that all of these patients could have the ability to complete a walk test. And the type of studies that we did in this clinical trial were in two main groups. First, we did exercise tests, and second, we did symptom questionnaires to look at how patients feel as well. In the exercise tests, you can see there we did at least 3 tests: the walk test, the peak exercise test, the submaximal exercise test. And the idea here was that we don't plan to use all of these tests in future trials, but we wanted to see how each of these tests behaves in the patients and whether patients can complete them and what kind of information will these tests give us. And based on that, we decided to choose the walk test as the test that we plan to use in future clinical studies. In addition to that, the symptom questionnaires that we use are common questionnaires that are included in clinical trials, like the SF-36, that is a quality of life questionnaire. We also used the modified fatigue impact scale that primarily evaluates fatigue in patients with chronic illness. And we looked at the brief pain inventory test that looks at pain in chronic conditions as well. And we used all of those tests because when we interviewed patients with PMM, they told us that the main symptoms that they have are lack of endurance, difficulty doing activities that require physical exercise, etc., etc. And here is a summary of the results of that proof of concept trial. The drug, PMM, was safe and well tolerated by the patients with PMM. Of course, I need to caveat this by saying this is a small study, but we anticipate the drug is likely to be tolerated well because it has been used in multiple studies, and in all of those studies, the drug was well tolerated as well. There were promising improvements in the walk test and in the symptoms questionnaires, and the majority of patients who took part in the study chose to continue treatment in the extension part, and that was very reassuring to us. In addition to this, the data that we obtained from the study was sufficient to inform the design of the next, what we call pivotal trial, which will be the main study that we would use to talk to regulatory agencies to get the drug approved for use in patients with PMM, should the drug prove to be efficacious. And here is, in broad terms, the design of the study that we are currently planning. This will be a 24-week, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial. Double-blind means the doctors don't know what drug they're giving to the patients, and the patients also don't know if they're receiving the drug or a placebo, or perhaps 1 or 2 different doses of the drug. In this study, actually, we are planning to use 2 different doses of Reneo and a placebo. So what that means is that out of every 3 patients, 2 patients will receive medication and 1 patient will receive a placebo, which is a dummy medication. The study will include about 200 patients with mitochondrial gene defects. This will be an adult study in patients older than 18 years of age and with a history of myopathy. Again, because we're doing exercise tests, we want patients to be able to complete the walk test. And we plan to include about 20 centers in North America, in Europe, and in Australia. Based on the results of the previous study that we did, we plan to use a walk test and also the symptom questionnaires as the measures of efficacy or outcome in the upcoming trial. And this is my last slide. Currently, as you know, a lot of the research is being halted because of the COVID epidemic, but that hasn't stopped us from doing our work, even though we cannot quickly bring patients to the clinic to do the research right now. what we can do is to work with the regulatory agencies in the different countries where we plan to work and start doing all the process to get the approvals to be able to do the studies in those countries. We're also working to select the clinics that will participate in the trial, and to make sure that we do all the paperwork and all the necessary agreements that need to be made so that a center can participate in the trial. As you know, each center has to go through what is called the ethics committees or the institutional review boards or IRBs that review the studies to make sure that it is okay to do the studies in the patients. And last but not least, we are hoping to be able to start the study around the first months of 2021. That's only 6 months from now. It's around the block, so we're working very hard to set up everything to be able to start the study very quickly as soon as the COVID epidemic permits. We anticipate the study will start very early in 2021. Well, it's been for me a pleasure to be able to share with you the Reneo programs. And I want to thank again the UMDF for giving us the opportunity to be part of this session. And I look forward to hopefully meeting you all in person in the near future. Thank you again.